In every ancient tale of witches, there is always a denser shadow, a name whispered with fear among the torn pages of time. But what if I told you that, behind the spells and cauldrons, there existed a real woman whose hatred and agony shaped the very fabric of European folklore? We are not speaking of a caricature invented to frighten children or justify medieval persecutions. We are speaking of an entity who walked among the living, whose presence was so intense, so accursed, that her story refused to die, spreading across centuries like a dormant poison. She was called by many names: the Witch of the Black Forest, the Widow of the Cold. Yet in documents forgotten by monasteries and in testimonies that survived the Inquisition, her true name appears like an unhealed wound: Nika Velic. The woman who, when burnt alive, is said to have vowed that the earth would never digest her, and that she would return in each generation to reap the descendants of those who condemned her. Today, her story resurfaces not by chance. Excavations in a forgotten village have awakened something that should never have been touched. And the two, accounts, collective nightmares, cries in the forest, diseases that defy science, seem to repeat a cycle that began centuries ago. You are about to learn the true origin of the witch who inspired fear in tales, songs, and nightmares. But beware, for if you listen to her story until the end, perhaps she may come to know your name as well. To the east of the Carpathy Mountains, where winter seems never to fully yield to spring, there existed a village shrouded by dense pines and perpetual mist. It was called Velograd, a handful of wooden houses twisted by cold, isolated from the world by muddy tracks and superstition. The peasants there did not dare to utter certain names after sunset, and among all taboos, one was absolute. One must not speak of the Lady of the Black Forest, the Ye. Woodland rising to the north of the village was deemed cursed. Trees twisted like the limbs of the dead, fluorescent fungi glowing at night, and sounds belonging to no known creature. There, they said, lived a solitary woman, tall, with hair like shadows and eyes reflecting the moonlight. Her name was Nika Velic, a stranger who appeared in Velograd with no known past, shortly after a plague had decimated half the local population. Nika was seldom seen, yet her presence was always followed by inexplicable events. Children who fell ill but then recovered overnight after finding a clump of herbs beneath their pillow. Sterile women who, after visiting the forest and returning in silence, became pregnant with twins. Men who attempted to follow her vanished, as if they had never existed. At the same time, strange diseases began to haunt the barns. Animals mutilated themselves inexplicably, and the crops sprouted in distorted forms. The people, torn between reverence and dread, began to call her the Lady of the Black Forest. Some sought her as a healer, others feared her as a witch, but no one dared confront her directly. It is told that Nika mastered the language of the trees and the whisper of the dead. Her dwelling was constructed of black stone and deer bones, and on new moon nights, torches would ignite of their own accord around the forest's edge. Some claimed she was one of Baba Yaga's daughters. Others believed she had made a pact with the spirit of winter, an entity ravenous for human warmth. Some swore she was the spirit itself, assuming human form merely to deceive the living. Once a priest from a distant province attempted to exorcise the place. He vanished without a trace. 2 days later, his iron cross was found embedded in a tree covered by a reddish moss that no one could remove. The villagers understood. There was a force in Nika Velic that surpassed prayers and dogma. Even so, fear grew. The children of Velograd were born with unusual marks. Some had entirely black eyes, others teeth as sharp as needles at birth. Rumors that the forest corrupted the blood spread, and the elders pressured the new priest, a younger, ambitious man, to act. The witch hunt, common elsewhere in Europe, had finally arrived in Velograd. But Nika, it is said, already knew. And, before they came for her, she inscribed symbols on the earth with her own blood. She buried something beneath the root of an ancient tree, something that pulsed and whispered, according to those who approached the site. When the villagers came bearing torches and ropes, she did not resist. She merely looked into each of their eyes and uttered words in a language no one recognized, yet all understood. It was a promise, a prophecy, a warning. They say that in that moment the sky darkened despite there being no clouds. The flames danced backwards, and a white crow alighted on Nika's shoulder, staring at the villagers with human eyes. They took her away, but she never left the forest. Nika Velic's trial took place on a frigid morning beneath the cracked bell of Velograd's small church. It was the year 1472, although official records of the empire make no mention of the event, as though it had been swept from the very stream of time. Yet lost fragments, monks' letters, pages rescued from charred codices, speak with disturbing clarity of a condemnation ritual that did not adhere to the rules of ordinary justice. It was more than a trial. It was a collective pact of fear, vengeance, and sacrifice. Nika was dragged to the main square, bound in iron chains, for common ropes were said to disintegrate at her touch. The populace gathered in silence, as if under a spell. Some had come to see evil vanquished. Others secretly hoped she would escape, because, hated though she was, Nika inspired something deeper. Fascination. The Inquisitor in charge, Father Thomas Rachnik, came from an order calling themselves the Custodians of the Veil, a shadowy sect within the church charged with handling cases deemed unclassifiable. He wore a black habit embroidered with strange symbols and carried an ancient tome with pages of lambskin inscribed with the signs of lunar corruption. Upon seeing Nika, he did not immediately pronounce condemnation. He merely opened the book, approached her, and drew a circle around the accused with his own blood. Thus began a trial outside of time. The charges were extensive: witchcraft, ritual murder, invocation of profane forces, seduction of married men, pact with dark entities. But there were also accounts of subtler phenomena, collective dreams in which Nika floated above the river, forgotten words appearing on walls, bells tolling at midnight without anyone to ring them. There was a pattern, an intelligence. The evil surrounding Nika did not seem chaotic. It was structured, deliberate. Witnesses took turns. A woman claimed her 7-year-old daughter began speaking an ancient tongue after looking directly at Nika. An elder swore he saw her transform water into blood. A boy in tears said he had been guided by her to his grandfather's bones, buried where they should never have been. Nika neither denied nor confirmed. She merely watched with impassive eyes, as if this were a performance she had seen 1,000 all. 8 times. When given the chance to speak in her defense, she only said, "I am the mirror. You are the ones who brought darkness here." Her words chilled everyone. The Inquisitor hesitated. He opened his tome, murmured a prayer in Latin mixed with some older language, perhaps Slavic, perhaps something even more archaic. Then he ordered Nika's body to be examined. They searched for the mark of the beast, a sign of demonic pact. They found something, a scar in the shape of a circle divided by 3 lines, right at the center of her spine. But when one of the priests touched it, he screamed and collapsed, convulsing. He died on the spot, black foam seeping from his lips. The crowd recoiled, and for the first time the Inquisitor faltered, yet they had gone too far. And the people, their fear inflamed, demanded an outcome. Nika was declared guilty and sentenced to the stake. But before the sentence could be carried out, the unexpected happened. At the moment her body was hoisted onto the pyre, the surrounding wood began to rot instantaneously, as though rejecting her presence. The pyre had to be rebuilt 3 times. When they finally managed to bind her, a fine rain began to fall, and still the flames surged with disproportionate intensity. The fire did not seem to consume Nika. It seemed to be drawn toward her. They say her screams were not of pain, but of invocation, that she sang amidst the flames in a dissonant melody, which made bells ring by themselves and dogs howl in their homes. And before her body disintegrated, she stared at the Inquisitor and said, "Velegrad shall be the altar. With every drop of blood spilled on this soil, I shall rise again." The next morning, Nika's remains were gone. Ordinary ashes, yes, but the heart intact, still beating, according to accounts the Inquisitor himself wrote in sealed letters. Never sent. The organ was said to have been buried in consecrated ground, yet each spring black flowers sprouted upon it, blooms no botanist could identify. Father Tomasz Rachnik disappeared soon after. His tomb was found, partially burnt, in an abandoned monastery in the Tatra Mountains. Its final words read, "She was not a woman, she was a threshold, and we crossed it." After Nika Velich's execution, Velegrad fell into an unnatural silence. The seasons seemed confused. Summer brought sudden frosts while winter grew oppressively damp, as though the earth wept continuously. The village, once modest but alive, began to wither. Births almost ceased entirely, and those born bore deformities or did not survive past the first full moon. People spoke little of Nika, but all felt her presence, not as a spirit, but as a fracture in the fabric of reality. The curse began subtly, like a disease without visible symptoms. First came the wheat. Entire harvests rotted within days, covered by a dark slime the elders called the sweat of condemned soil. Then the animals. Cows gave birth to stillborn, calves with human teeth. Pigs went mad and attacked their owners at night. Dogs howled until they died, their eyes rolling back as though they saw something invisible to everyone else. But what disturbed most were the whispers. Voices emerged in the fields at dawn, intoning songs only the children understood. They began to reply to these voices, first in dreams, then while awake. Some children simply vanished, leaving no trace. Those who returned were mute or spoke in dead languages. Some attempted to flee Velegrad. Entire families departed in wagons, but accounts suggest they never reached any destination. A letter found at the border of another village bore the phrase, "The forest moves, there is no escape." In another letter written in blood read, "She walks beneath our roots." Over the years, inexplicable events continued. A monk seeking to purify the soil dug deep and unearthed a skeleton with a mummified, still-beating heart. The same symbol marked on the spine. When he tried to destroy it, the monk was seized by a fever that drove him to delirium for 7 days until he tore out his own eyes with an iron cross. His final words were, "She still listens, she learns." In each generation, a new calamity befell Velegrad. Mass deaths, spontaneous fires, outbreaks of madness. And in every case, there was a pattern. A woman always resembling Nika would appear on the outskirts of the village. Never the same individual, but each with impossibly dark eyes and a hypnotic voice. Some helped the people, others merely watched, but all disappeared mysteriously after the chaos. They were seen as reincarnations, echoes, or even temporal manifestations of the curse itself. In the 1800s, a Hungarian scholar named István Gál consulted forgotten sources and cross-referenced Vatican archives with pagan accounts from the region. He identified a cycle. Every 99 years, Nika's curse reached a new apex, and the land demanded a fresh sacrifice. Gál traveled to Velegrad in 1871 and vanished. His diary, found years later in a sealed crypt beneath the local church, described visions of a reverse garden, where trees grew inward into the earth and bodies hung from roots like ripe fruit. But the curse did not remain confined to the village. As descendants of Velograd's villagers migrated to other regions, the signs followed them. Identical nightmares surfaced in different countries, inexplicable deaths in families tied by blood to the original condemners. In a Bavarian town, an entire school was closed after dozens of children simultaneously drew the figure of a woman with crow-like hair and elongated arms ending in roots. None knew Nika Velic, yet all called her the Dark Mother, and even as time erased records, some symbols persisted. The mark Nika bore on her back began to appear on old tombstones, in tapestries of isolated convents, even in churches carved in hidden locations. Those who delved too deeply into these studies ended up insane or simply vanished, as if the very act of remembering Nika reopened the wound. In 1939, during the Second World War, a Nazi battalion searched for occult artifacts in Eastern Europe. A group of Ahnenerbe officers discovered the ruins of Velograd and excavated the area. Little is known of what they found, but a ciphered letter sent to Berlin mentioned an inverted sanctuary, a presence that contorts time, and the heart that still beats. The group never returned. Since then, attempts to rebuild the village have failed. Electrical equipment constantly malfunctions, compasses spin uncontrollably, and the trees seem to shift slightly between visits. Velograd is now avoided even on maps, and the few who know its location keep the secret as though hiding a plague. Yet there are those who still hear Nika Velic's song in their dreams. Feminine voices, multiple, echoing in forgotten dialects, inviting listeners to return to the forest. The promise is always the same. All pain will be repaid, all injustice balanced, every name remembered. Among occult researchers, a fear grows that the next manifestation of the curse is no longer bound to the accursed land. It may be anywhere. Perhaps it is already within someone, sleeping, waiting. In the early 2000s, an unofficial archaeological expedition was conducted by a small group of scholars and occult enthusiasts who had discovered, in Vatican archives, leaked by dissident researchers, clues to Velograd's location. Driven by a mixture of skepticism, fascination, and intellectual challenge, they journeyed to the Carpathy region, determined to prove that the legends of Nika Velic were mere distorted mythology. They did not know, or pretended not to know, that by disturbing forgotten bones they would awaken not only hidden truths, but something older than history itself. Their arrival was accompanied by a rising sequence of misfortunes: failing equipment, GPS losing signal, mysterious illnesses. One member, the linguist Elena Twardowski, began having recurring dreams of a veiled woman whispering phrases she could translate only upon waking. The phrases, always in archaic Slavic, described opening rituals, blood offerings, and the location of a living heart buried beneath the navel of the world. These visions guided the expedition to the foundations of Velograd's ancient church. There, beneath the fungus-covered altar, they found a staircase descending to a hidden crypt. The place seemed older than the village itself. Polished stone, walls bore inscriptions mixing Latin, runes, and pictograms akin to Mesopotamian scripts. At the center, a womb-like stone structure sheltered a pulsating object wrapped in fossilized roots, a black heart, still warm to the touch. Elena, in a silent trance, approached, murmuring, "She is still dreaming." Contact with the artifact triggered a series of events. On leaving the crypt, they realized the surrounding forest had transformed. Time felt disjointed, as though hours folded upon themselves. Shadows moved among the trees with will of their own, and birdsong was replaced by a subtle, dissonant melody, like children's voices chanting laments. Members of the expedition began disappearing one by one. Their cameras recorded impossible images. Elena walking atop suspended roots with entirely white eyes. One researcher hung upside down, spinning slowly as if in a womb of vines. Only 2 members returned. One never spoke again. The other, a Romanian anthropologist named Andrei Petrescu, wrote a report before taking his own life, describing Velograd as a spiritual inflection point and Nika as a living idea, a coagulation of ancestral wills embodied in a name. After this episode, phenomena began emerging elsewhere in the world. In museums, artifacts of unknown origin started pulsing under certain climatic conditions. In psychiatric hospitals, patients reported identical dreams of a woman with crows on her shoulders, walking through inverted forests. In churches, paintings inexplicably darkened, revealing beneath them veiled images of a female figure surrounded by roots and fire. Science, evidently, ignored such occurrences. But in secret circles, esoteric orders, sects, marginal cults, the conviction grew that Nika Velic was not merely a historical witch, but an awakened archetype, an entity without a fixed body, infiltrating collective memory, nightmares, and the gaps of history. In 2021, a series of drone recordings in Slovakian forests revealed geometric patterns among the trees, symbols similar to those inscribed in Rachnik's tome. The British geographer responsible for the footage disappeared days later, leaving only a note. The forest remembered me. Today, some believe that the echoes of Nika's curse are adapting to the modern world, appearing in electrical failures, in collective mental breakdowns, in outbreaks of inexplicable violence. She is not a ghost of the past, but a breach in the present, a force feeding on injustice, ancestral pain, and willful ignorance. Her name was erased from formal history, but perhaps that is precisely what keeps her alive, oblivion as an involuntary cult. Thus, the Witch of Folklore remains, not as a legend but as a wound, open, pulsing, waiting for eyes to recognize her so that she may awaken fully. There are stories that survive time, not because they are inscribed in books, but because they are ingrained in the flesh of the world. Nika Velic's is one of them. She is not merely a legendary figure, but the echo of a cry that was never silenced, the vengeance of a woman reduced to myth so that her truth would be forgotten. In every erased symbol, in every burned record, there is an attempt to end a cycle that continues renewing itself. And the more we try to bury her in folklore, the more she stirs in the shadows of the present. The figure of the witch, so vilified by history, may have been born from the sum of many fears. But Nika was real. Her curse, her pain, and her promise still crawl through the veins of the world like ravenous roots. Not as punishment, but as reminder of what happens when we silence the incomprehensible, when we turn the different into a threat. Her story watches us from among the branches, in the subtext of what we dare not study, and perhaps, just perhaps, calls us back to the forest to finish what we began. If there is something to learn from the accounts, visions, and disappearances, it is that there are no eternal seals. No truth can be buried forever, and every curse is at its core a mirror. Perhaps Nika Velic was never just a woman. Perhaps she is an idea, dangerous, indomitable, ever-renewing, an ancestral cry against those who dared to subjugate the unspeakable. And if it is true that she returns every generation, then she may be closer than ever. Look around, listen to the whispers. Strange dreams, recurring symbols, shadows that refuse to obey the light. These are signs. You may ignore them, rationalize them away, but she will always find someone who heeds her song, because stories like hers do not end. They merely sleep until they are told once more. If this story has awakened something in you, share it. Bring others to the clearing. And remember, until our next descent into history's shadows,